Greetings. These next 3 books have nothing to do with each other, but I enjoyed reading them this year and I'd like to pass them along to you. They are totally random, but I love them. The first one is completely unusual. I've never recommended anything like this, but I really think you'll enjoy it. It's a fiction book, actually. I don't know if I've recommended a fiction book before, but this one is great. And let me just give you a little background to it. Our youngest daughter, Rachel, last January, a year ago, married a wonderful Christian man from Japan. And I think as a Christmas gift, she gave me a gift card to, I think it was Barnes & Noble. And so I thought, okay, so this is special. This comes from Rachel. I don't want to just buy anything. What could I buy that would be sort of connect me to her? And it occurred to me, I remember back in college reading an anthology of American literature, a really thick book on short stories and excerpts from longer books from American history. And I loved it. And so I thought, I wonder if they sell something like that for Japanese literature. And I found them. So I found one, this one right here, Anthology of Japanese Literature, from the earliest era to the mid-19th century, compiled and edited by Donald Keene. Now I found a modern Japanese literature one from the mid-1800s or mid-19th century to the present day, and that was good. I didn't enjoy it quite as much. This one that goes way back into from the earliest era, which is sort of like the Middle Ages for us, for Western Europe. For European countries, Middle Ages is like 500 to 1500, and Japanese history, recorded history, doesn't quite go back so far like that. And so the first story, I think, is from, let's see here. Yeah, 794 AD. And I think the earliest one, let me see here. This one, in the middle of the 8th century. So maybe they're all from the 8th century and beyond. Anyway, so they're really good. There's some poetry, there's a lot of short stories, and you just, in addition to being just really interesting literature, you also get a real feel for Japanese culture over the centuries. So I highly recommend it. I really enjoyed it. I read it little by little and kind of savored each one and had a blast with it. The next one, again, is completely different. I read it as an ebook, and I read it, I can't remember why I read it. Maybe because I had this sort of lingering fascination with American culture's preoccupation with personality profiles. And I've always been really skeptical of that. In fact, honestly, I've always been sort of resistant to that. Like, I don't want to be pegged as something. To me, there's just something really uneasy about saying, oh, I can capture you with a number or with a set of letters. I can put you in a box and describe you using these criteria that I never really know where this stuff comes from. And I don't want to be treated like a formula. Oh, he's a this, and this, and therefore, this is kind of how you relate to him. Yeah, the whole thing just kind of makes me uneasy. So I always kind of resist doing it as much as I can. Plus the fact that I never really know how to answer them when I'm taking a personality test. Like, I don't know what, like, do you prefer A, B, C, or D? And they, 4 different scenarios. And I'm like, I don't know. So eventually, usually what I end up doing, since they're usually multiple choice, I end up just sort of going like A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, or I'll go like A, B, C, D, D, C, B, A, like down the line, I'll choose my answers in some sort of pattern, A, D, C, A, D, B, C, or I'll just be like, well, I haven't answered this one in a while, so I'll click that one, because I just never know how to do these things. I just don't like them. So a while back, I did a research project on the Enneagram, and it was mildly disturbing, but it got me into the whole idea of pegging each other and evaluating each other based on personality profiles. So I found a really great book, really interesting and slightly disturbing book on the Myers-Briggs test. It's called The Personality Brokers, The Strange History of Myers-Briggs and the Birth of Personality Testing. The Personality Brokers, The Strange History of Myers-Briggs and the Birth of Personality Testing. The author is, well, I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce this right, but the author is Merv Emery, E-M-R-E, M-E-R-V-E, M-E-R-V-E, M-E-R-E, Merv Emery or something like that. She's I believe she's a professor of English in England. And I watched a video of her being interviewed about her book, and I thought it was really interesting. You can find it on YouTube. And so I went ahead and bought the book. And it's a really good book. It really will make you think about, like, why are you subjecting yourself to a set of criteria that doesn't really have really good reason to use that criteria? It's just a fascinating history. And so I recommend getting it and reading it. In the interview, at least, I think in the book as well, the author just really questions, like, even if there is validity to the criteria being used by the Myers-Briggs, do we really, it's kind of an ethical question. She calls it a philosophical, I would call it a philosophical / religious / ethical question about whether we should be capturing each other in that way, reducing each other, reducing ourselves and each other according to personality tests. It's just, anyway, it's an interesting question, and she goes through where the Myers-Briggs comes from. It's totally unexpected. Like, I didn't realize this is where it came from. It's really a fascinating history from this woman. And anyway, just read it. It's a very interesting history, and I think you'll really enjoy it. The third book I want to recommend is on, again, a totally different, well, yeah, kind of a different subject. Now that I think about it, actually, maybe it does have something to do with Myers-Briggs. Not much. But it's called The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self by Carl R. Trueman, spelled like it sounds, Truman, Carl R. Trueman. The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, Cultural Amnesia, Expressive Individualism, and the Road to Sexual Revolution. This book has been very famous. The author, Carl Trueman, is pretty famous as a Christian scholar. I think he's a historian, I'm pretty sure. And he's been around giving interviews on lots of different things. And he published this book, and it caught a lot of attention. And so finally somebody recommended it to me. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to read it. And I loved it. It is like another book that I've read, by Charles Taylor called Sources of the Self. I don't recommend that one unless you really want to work hard at it. It's a very scholarly, philosophical book that just, I mean, it got way too deep for me at places, and I just don't recommend it. But it is a very exhilarating book. I read it first in graduate school. I reread it recently, and it's an excellent book. This one, I do recommend. It's still scholarly, but it's more, a little bit more on a popular level. I don't recommend it for light reading. It is not light reading, but it's an excellent book. It talks about how American culture got into this place where the self and deep introspection and preoccupation with the self has become core to how we relate to the world, to each other. And specifically because of that, because who as I navel gaze and I search inside myself for who I really am and how I'm made and my authentic self. I often hear of that from especially younger generations, this real preoccupation with the authentic self. And so we examine ourselves, deep in ourselves, who am I really? And then once I decide who I really am, then I insist on everybody else approving and acclaiming, applauding me for who I am deep in my soul. And if I don't get that approval, then I'm devastated. And I perceive that I can't live a good life unless I know myself, I can live my authentic life, and others approve of it. That has all sorts of ramifications in all different ways. I love this book, and I highly recommend it. I strongly recommend it, not only because it's an interesting book, but I think it has powerful things to say. Now, Carl Trueman writes it as sort of a critique of modern secular American culture. Personally, I think it is dug way too deep into the American Christian church, and I sense it as an apostolic Christian. I sense it sort of bleeding into the apostolic Christian church, and it's really disturbing. So I highly recommend that one as well. All right, 3 books, maybe in time to ask for Christmas, or at least to use if you get a gift card, you can use your Christmas gift card on these 3 books. They'll be well worth it. I think you'll find them interesting, and you'll find the Japanese anthology just very, very interesting and informative about a different place on this planet. The Myers-Briggs and the Trueman books, I think you'll find just sort of helpful to kind of understand our culture and our preoccupations and how we got to these current set of preoccupations. So hope you enjoy them. God bless you.